Welcome in. It is Big Ten Today. Great to have you with us on this Wednesday. Dave Rivson, Rayfeld Davis. We are one day away from tipping things off for the Big Ten in the NCAA tourney. The tourney, of course, kicked off last night. And if Virginia's 14 first-half points didn't get you fired up,
man,
I don't know what will. You have to check your pulse.
Feels like Christmas Eve. I'm excited to get tomorrow going. It's the biggest day of basketball in the whole entire year. Everybody's going to be glued to the TV all day long. The stars should show up. I'm excited to see how the Big Ten does. I think this is going to be the year that the Big Ten gets over the hump. It's been 24 years. I think we end all those discussions this year. The Big Ten wins the championship.
All right. And you believe that team is?
Purdue, the Boilermakers.
Well, you can make an argument for a couple others. At least one other I can think of that would be in the discussion. Purdue will get an opponent tonight, by the way. And then, again, we're off and running tomorrow. That's our big story. 6 Big Ten teams are in the schedule. The 2 games tomorrow. Michigan State kicks off the day against Mississippi State. Then Illinois, a mid-afternoon tilt with Morehead State. So let's start with Michigan State. Some questioning whether they belong at all. Popular talking point these last couple days. You, on the other hand, have them making a Final Four. So you're on the exact opposite side of the why are they in the bracket crowd.
Yep, they're going to prove everybody wrong.
You are firmly behind them. So tell people who maybe haven't watched the last couple days why.
Because when you start with Mississippi State, everything starts and it ends with Josh Hubbard for those guys. He's averaging 17 points a game, but he's only 38% from the field, and he's 5'10", and he's a freshman. He hasn't had to deal with the backcourt of A.J. Hogarth, Tyson Walker, Jay Nakins, and even Trey Holloman off the bench. Defensively, I think Michigan State can throw a lot of guys at him. They can wear him down. He's going to have to check Tyson Walker, which I don't know if he can. I think Michigan State can get past that game. And then you get to North Carolina, same story with R.J. Davis. He can get you 30, he can get you 20 any given night, but he has had a tendency to shoot them out of games this season. You think the championship game in the ACC tournament, 30 points on 26 shots. Earlier games this season, 28 points on 24 shots. If Michigan State can get him going in that direction, and I think the key matchup in that game, Cormac Ryan, Jay Nakins. I think Jay Nakins will do a great job on Cormac Ryan, but I don't think Cormac Ryan can keep Jay Nakins out of the lane. You get a hooked up Jay Nakins, attacking in transition, making open shots, getting to the rim. I think that interior defense is good enough for Baycott, but I think they take care of business there. Then they take care of Alabama and Marcus Sears, a team in Alabama, they can score the basketball. Michigan State, one of the best defenses in the country. Marcus Sears is one of the best guards in the country. But again, you have 4 different guys you can throw at them, and then you force them to defend on the other end. Alabama's giving up 80 points a game. I think Michigan State is going to slow that game down, make it a half-court game, and they can come away with that one as well.
They're scoring 90. Right. I mean, that's the trade-off, right? I mean, they're really good offensively, and they are dreadful defensively. There's no question about it. I do think, look, if you're in that 8-9 game, no one wants to be in the 8-9 game, right? You'd much rather be at 10 than be in 8 or 9. It's one of the oddities of the NCAA tournament. But if you're going to be in the 8-9 game, you want to be up against the most vulnerable one.
Exactly.
And I think North Carolina is the most vulnerable one.
Me too.
I'm not sure they deserved to be a 1 seed. I think you could certainly make. I mean, I still can't get over the fact that Iowa State is an 8 seed. I know you're, or is the 8th, is a 2 seed, but is the 8th in that pecking order. I know you're not as flabbergasted as I am. Again, look, it's Tom Izzo in March.
Exactly.
And so I get that. I get your idea. I guess I just keep coming back to, and I think I said something similar to this yesterday. We haven't seen them put a bunch of good games together.
Right.
We have seen them put individual good games together.
Yep.
The key to the tournament is, can you play consistently well?
Yep.
So, look, I mean, no time like the present. Right?
Exactly.
Better late than never, however you want to put it.
Yep.
Can you string together? Can you play like you did against Baylor, or some reasonable facsimile thereof 4 straight times? To me, that's the challenge.
Or if you play like you did against Purdue. You think about it, they shut Purdue down from the perimeter, every single guy. You just had Zach Edey dominating inside, and you look at Mississippi State, they don't have that guy. Go to North Carolina, they have Baycott, but Baycott is not a Zach Edey inside. They have the guys that can deal with that. And then you also look at Trey Holloman off of the bench. When Trey comes into the game, when he produces at a high level, when he's making shots offensively and giving it all defensively, they're a better better team. When Trey Holloman makes more than 2 threes a game, they are 7-2 this season. He's been big time. He's a guy that can come in a game, spark the job defensively, get him going in transition, be a ball mover offensively, and bring just great energy, and he's not scared of anybody on the floor. He's going to come into these games and eat defensively. He knows his job is to check Josh Hubbard off of the bench, to check R.J. Davis when he comes in, to check Marcus Sears, to check Caleb Love. You look at Trey Holloman going chest to chest with Zach Edey, you know he's not afraid of any challenge. If they can get production off of the bench, if they can get Xavier Booker to make some shots, this is where their athletes come to shine. In the tournament, it's where Cohen Carr has a good tournament. Xavier Booker comes out to play. The guys that are unsung heroes, those young guys play better in March because you don't play a game and then go watch 2 hours of film, then go practice again. You play in the game, you go into the hotel, you're going into that little bitty hotel film room, it's tape on the floor for walkthrough, and then you're going right back to chill, and then that next day, you're going to play again. It's AAU style, and AAU guys play better in this style, so I think guys like Xavier Booker will surprise some people. Cohen Carr will be able to get in the game against North Carolina, get some rebounds, get some blocks at the rim. I think this Michigan State team is poised. It really reminds me of that 2015 team that didn't figure it out all season long. They took some lumps. The Big Ten was a little weaker, but when they got to the tournament, they hit a stride because they had pros on that team. I think this Michigan State team has pros too.
Right, and we've seen Izzo do this, right?
Yep.
Made it as a 7 seed, the Final Four. He's made it a couple times as a 5 seed. This would be his lowest seeded team ever to make it. This would be his greatest accomplishment in terms of getting to a Final Four. What about Illinois? They are facing one of the more deliberate teams in the tourney in Morehead States. You get that interesting contrast in styles here at the outset. Give us a little insight into their opening round game.
I think it's going to be defensively. Morehead State, they're going to slow the game down. And you look, Riley Minnick, 6'7", forward, averaging 21 points, 10 rebounds a game. This is a game for Illinois' defense to really sink in. I'm looking at Terrence Shannon and Ty Rodgers, 2 guys that can completely take Riley out of this basketball game. I loved how Terrence approached the defensive end in the Big Ten tournament. You look at Keisei Tominaga, was on a heater coming off of that Indiana game. He scored 18 points on 18 shots. You go to A.J. Storr in that Wisconsin game, 24 points on 20 shots. If this is a game where Terrence Shannon can take Riley Minnick out of the game defensively, and then he get out in transition and score the ball, Illinois is doing something this season that I haven't seen a team do in the Big Ten. They forced the entire league, play our way or it's the highway. We will run you out by 20 or you got to keep up with us. It's an offensive-minded approach. They're going to force Morehead State to try to keep up. They're not going to slow down. And when they get to BYU is a team that's going to try and keep up. They don't have the athletes. I know they have 7, 8 guys averaging 9+ points, but they don't have the athletes in transition for a Ty Rodgers, for a Terrence Shannon, for a Quincy Guerrier, and they're 5-man. There's just no way that he can check Coleman Hawkins out on the perimeter.
It's a loaded bracket.
Yep.
I don't think there's any question about that. I mean, they have the misfortune of being in the bracket with the most well-thought-of one, the highest overall seed in UConn, defending national champ there. You know, UConn's got a lot playing in their favor here, not the least of which is that ultimately then they'd be playing in Boston were they to get to a matchup with the Huskies. But, you know, I hear everything you're saying on Illinois. I mean, if they play like they did last weekend, I think they got a great chance. The thing that concerns me with Illinois is they haven't been starting well, right? These first halves have really been dreadful. And in the NCAA tournament, I do think there's that concern of perhaps you dig yourself too big a hole. I mean, if you do that against UConn, it's a game over.
No, I agree. You can't dig your hole against a team like UConn. But I look at a UConn team, and I think Trishan Newton, I know he gets a lot of credit for their success. I think Terrence Shannon's a better player. I think Terrence Shannon wins that individual matchup. I think Marcus Domask, he wins his matchup against Cam Spencer. And then I think it comes to the big guys. I know they're going to try and go inside against Illinois. That's what everybody wants to do. They want to get Coleman Hawkins one-on-one inside. But it's this game where he can flip that matchup on the offensive end and get Klingon outside the perimeter to guard him. And I know some teams that put their big on Ty Rodgers, but Ty Rodgers has figured out a way to be playable at that position, to crash the offensive glass, to be a good screen and roller. So that's going to be a tough matchup no matter who you put on Ty. But if you put your big on Coleman Hawkins, if he's making shots, he's driving to the basket, if he's focused offensively, shooting it when he should shoot, passing it when he should pass, this Illinois team is extremely dangerous. When Coleman is hooked up, there is nothing you can do with Illinois. He's a guy that can block shots, he can guard, he can rim run, he can do a lot of different things that can affect winning. And when he's making threes, the entire floor is spread open. Marcus Domask starts to play that booty ball. It takes this team to another level. Coleman can play the 4, the 5, and then you get Dane Danger in there battling with Klingen. I like where Illinois is headed, and I like how they got Dane some run in the Big Ten tournament.
This is a Final Four quality roster.
Yes, I agree.
Right? Like, you've got a stud in Terrence Shannon who, especially with these rules, and we've talked about this new block charge this year and really how difficult it is to draw a charge.
Exactly.
Right? With having to be there before the guy plants his foot. He's as indefensible a player as there is, impossible to defend.
Yes.
As there is in college basketball. Maybe this side of Zach Edey. I mean, it's a different challenge, no doubt. But then the pieces around him are great. I mean, I'm 100% with you on I think this is a Final Four quality team. I just wonder about the misfortune of where they're placed and whether or not they can overcome that. But the beauty of this tournament is one seeds lose.
Exactly, all the time.
Right? They lose all the time. Yeah. So we shall see. All right, plenty more coming up from Rafael. We'll get into more X factors ahead for those Friday games. Rafael and I will run through the players he'll be focusing on for the other 4 Big Ten teams. But next, NCAA titles on the line on the mat this weekend. Shane Sparks is in Kansas City. He will join us straight ahead. The NCAA Wrestling Championships are this weekend in Kansas City. No fewer than 9 Big Ten wrestlers are seated in the top 2 in their respective weight classes. That includes 6 number 1 seeds, 4 from Penn State, 1 each from Ohio State and Nebraska. The Nittany Lions, the overwhelming team favorite. They're looking to win the title for the 11th time in the last 13 meets. Shane Sparks is joining me now. He is already in Kansas City getting ready for this one. Shane, we'll get to Penn State specifically, take a deep dive on them in a moment. But just big picture, the Big Ten has won 16 straight team titles in this event. Is there any reason to think that whether it's Penn State or by some crazy chance someone else, that streak won't extend to 17?
Yeah, Dave, the reality is that Penn State is the huge favorite. I've told you many times before, in this sport, you got to earn it. Nothing is given, and that remains to be true. But Penn State is a heavy favorite in the Big Ten. 96 qualifiers here at these championships. 2 teams, Penn State along with Minnesota, each have qualified all 10 weight classes. Iowa qualified 9 along with Michigan, Nebraska, and Ohio State. So as always, high Big Ten contingency here. But Penn State with 4 guys, number 1 seed, all guys ranked or seated in the top 10. They'll be a heavy favorite, no question. But outside of Penn State, really good team race. I mean, Iowa, Nebraska, Michigan, Ohio State, these teams will be fighting for, a top 3 spot. Those are the trophy positions. So Penn State's the favorite, but a lot of teams where if they can make a few things go their way, they can be in position to take a trophy back home.
And for a little bit of perspective, consider the Big Ten has never failed to win the team trophy in the entire time the Big Ten Network's been on the air. And we launched in 2007. I mean, this run of dominance is just staggering. And let's just be honest, Penn State has had a ton to do with it here recently. You have been saying all year that this team is just even a cut above some of their other great teams. Where does this team stack up historically? Like, is this the best NCAA wrestling team ever?
It's definitely in the conversation. We'll see how things play out. A couple of things with Penn State putting their dominance in perspective. Only one time in NCAA tournament history has there been 10 All-Americans. That was Minnesota in 2001 under legendary head coach Jay Robinson. The Gophers did not have a finalist in 2001 getting those 10 All-Americans. We've seen 9 All-Americans. Iowa's done that a number of times. But this Penn State team, could they get 10 All-Americans? That is one thing that could happen. They have had 5 national champions on 2 occasions, 2017 and 2022. Could they get 6 national champions? We'll wait and see. Couple other historical things to keep in mind. 1997 Iowa, they scored the most points. The 97 Hawkeyes under Dan Gable. And then in 1986, Iowa had the widest margin of victory over second place Oklahoma. That's the number to keep an eye on. I would point this out. I think one thing that you have to at least mention is with the 3-point takedown and the 4-point near fall, those rule changes in recent years, that will only help Penn State to widen the gap, in my opinion. But yeah, this Penn State team, when it's all said and done, this team could go down possibly as the best team ever. We'll have to wait and see, but they are some kind of freight train.
You talk about how good they were a year ago. I mean, their gap over second place Iowa was 55 points. That was larger than the gap between second place Iowa and the 20th place team in the NCAA tournament. So again, it just gives you a sense of how dominant they've been. One of the big storylines last year as we get into the weight classes was at 125, and Spencer Lee got upset by Matt Ramos. I know 125 is intriguing to you again this year. So as we start to go through some of those weight classes, let's start there. What stands out in that weight class?
125, Dave. You talk to guys that have been around this sport for 40 or 50 years. They say they've never seen a weight class like 125. A handful of guys, like 6, 7 guys have been ranked number one at some point this season. 125 is loaded. You have the true freshman, Braden Davis of Penn State. He was in high school at this time last year. He's the number one seed at 125. Keel Sanderson's first ever Big Ten champion at the weight class at Penn State. Matt Ramos is the 4 seed. Of course, he pinned Spencer Lee in the semifinals last year. I mean, that match will live on forever. On top of the bracket, also at 125, Patrick McKee is the 9 seed, 2-time All-American from Minnesota. Keep an eye on Drake Ayala. He is the number 3 seed from Iowa. He was 3rd at the Big Tens. Here's an Iowa stat, an amazing stat. The Iowa Hawkeyes have had an NCAA finalist every year since 1990. In 1990, they had 3 finalists, 2 national champions, and Tom and Terry Brands. They've had a national finalist 33 straight tournaments. Can they make it 34? A guy like Drake Ayala could be that guy to continue that streak.
Speaking of national finalists, Levi Haynes was a national finalist at 157 last year, fell just a little bit short. He has not lost this year. Give us an overview of that weight class and his chance of being at the top of the podium.
157 is so deep, but he's been phenomenal. A little bit of a slow start for Levi Haynes, at least compared to his standards, but he found another gear in the regular season. I think back to that match against Jared Freinig of Iowa, dominated the Hawkeye, was able to take him down, was able to accumulate a few minutes of riding time. That might be one of the best single performances that stand out in my mind this past season. He's got some experience. He's a true sophomore. Last year, made the national final at 157, fell to Austin O'Connor of North Carolina, who had won his second title. But I like Levi Haynes. I really like his position at 157. It's a tough weight class. They're all tough. There's a lot of depth at 157, and he is joined in that top half by Michigan's Will Lewan, Shea Saldate of Michigan State. He's got some Big Ten combatants up in that top half of the bracket, but one thing we know at Penn State, when the lights go on, they find a way to perform at a high level, and Levi Haynes, I like his chances at 157.
You were talking about the depth at 157, 165. I mean, those around the sport are saying it may be the deepest weight class this year. Do you share that opinion on the 165s?
165 is super exciting because you have the number 1 seed, 2-time reigning national champion Keegan O'Toole. He's the 1 seed. The 4 seed is David Carr from Iowa State. He won a national title in 2021, then down at 157. The 5 seed is Dean Hamady of Wisconsin, 2-time All-American for Chris Bono and the Badgers. So that top half is really stacked. The bottom half, Mitchell Messenbrink, the redshirt freshman for Penn State, a 22-0 record, bonus points machine. He has just exploded out of the scene. He's become a real fan favorite. Of course, in that Big Ten final, he trailed Wisconsin's Dean Hamady, the reigning Big Ten champion, 9-2, 30 seconds left in that second period, found a way to win at 13-11. So the fact that Messenbrink won that Big Ten title and puts him as the 2 seed, that is huge for him. And one quick story as far as Mitchell Messenbrink goes, mentioned him as the number 2 seed. The number 1 seed is Keegan O'Toole. They were high school teammates at Heartland Arrowhead in Wisconsin. So that's kind of a cool story there at the weight class as well. That high school actually has 3 guys in the weight class from Heartland Arrowhead. So cool story for the Warhawks.
Yeah, no doubt. We talked about the Big Ten wrestlers ranked in the top 2 here coming out. Is there a Big Ten wrestler not in the top 2 that you think has a legitimate chance to win a national championship here?
Mentioned Matt Ramos. He's a 4 seed at 125. Yeah. Real Woods at 141 pounds. He's the 3 seed. He's on the bottom with the 2 seed. Bo Bartlett, the Big Ten champion. Jesse Mendez is up top. 1 low seed, mentioned 157. Michael Blockus is the 13 seed for Minnesota. Blockus, 2-time All-American. He was an All-American last year at 149, went to the Big Tens this season with only 1 loss, suffered an injury. But Michael Blockus as a 13 seed at 157 could cause some chaos in that bracket. And of course, the obvious one, Dave, at 174 pounds, the 9 seed Carter Starachi, 3-time national champion, goes for his 4th. He's the 9 seed. 174 is bonkers. At 174, the 1 seed is Micaiah Lewis from Virginia Tech. Starachi beat him to win a national title in Detroit in 2022. Also, Shane Griffith from Michigan. He won a national title then for Stanford in 2021. He's a 2-time finalist. Now he's at Michigan. He's the 4 seed. Starachi's the 9. That top half of the brackets at 174 has 3 national champions. The bottom half, combine those guys, have 1 All-American honor. That's Peyton Mako, Missouri. He's the 22 seed, but that really stands out. Of course, Starachi, one of the key storylines at this tournament is his health. Of course, you have his teammate Aaron Brooks at 197. He's going for his 4th individual national title. It's only been done by 5 guys. Most recently, Yanni Diakomahalis of Cornell last year. Spencer Lee didn't get his 4th. The Big Ten now with the crack at 2 more guys going for 4, and Starachi and Brooks. So a lot of great storylines here in Kansas City. And what I love about this, Dave, you have 330 guys. They all have a story, and now they will add to their book. Next couple of chapters, how are you going to write those chapters in your book? It'll be fun to see.
Shane, great stuff as always. I don't feel like I need to tell you to enjoy this. I think you can do that on your own, but I'll say it anyway. Enjoy the weekend, and thanks so much for lending your insights. We always appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Dave. Grateful to be here and always enjoy talking some wrestling with you. Have a great day.
Last week before the Big Ten Gymnastics Championships, a familiar name among the gymnasts of the week in the Big Ten, Michigan's Sierra Brooks, honored for the 7th time this season. She was the Gymnast of the Year last season in the conference, shared the award this week with Nebraska's Emma Spence. The Big Ten Championships this weekend in East Lansing. Olivia Karras is a former Big Ten all-around champ, and she joins us now. So Michigan's won this event 8 of the last 9 years, but Michigan State was the regular season champ. So how do you see it coming into this weekend here?
Definitely a lot of competition. For the first time in a while, Michigan has that legacy. They have 26 Big Ten championships in program history. So they're not unfamiliar with winning these types of competitions and coming out on top. However, as you mentioned, Michigan State winning the regular season, winning the head-on-head duel with Michigan. So they have that going for them this season. But I'm excited actually about Ohio State and Minnesota. They round out the evening session of the Big Ten Championship. Ohio State has yet to put a full, complete competition together. Really great on 3 events, not their best on 1. So this could be the weekend that they do that and upset everyone. But then there's Minnesota, who has just kept climbing. They've had the highest score last weekend of these 4 teams. So they really are peaking at the right time, and this could be their meat to take away.
And Minnesota's second all-time in terms of team championships, but there's a pretty big gap.
Absolutely.
27, right, for Michigan, and 6 for Minnesota. So that's significant. But again, it is interesting that you've got that competition. And how much does it help Michigan State, like being a Jenison? Does that matter much in gymnastics, kind of the familiarity of being in the place where you practice a lot?
For sure, especially considering the fact that they're going to have this amazing podium. It's championship feel, so you get the home court advantage, but you also get to feel comfortable in your space with the grandiose of a Big Ten championship. And so I think it's exciting for them. I don't know if it's necessarily a leg up in the competition, but it always helps to be home, have your home fans, your locker room, and just feel more comfortable.
So it's not like basketball where, okay, all right. So, but they'll have a good cheering section, as we know. Bring people up to date on the top individuals. We talked about Sierra Brooks, and she's been phenomenal. But who else should people know about as we go from the teams to the individuals?
Well, Sierra, obviously so incredible and impressive, holding the program record all around at Michigan. Really difficult feat to have. So, of course, you should be watching for her. Gabby Wilson from Michigan, ranked 17th nationally. So she's clearly on the heels of her teammate and has a lot to prove. Emma Spence, we talked about. She continues to rise in the rankings in the all-around, really finding her position on all 4 events and contributing with some really big numbers. But there are a couple other athletes that people know well that could really slide in. Skyla Schulte from Michigan State and in the top 25 in the all-around nationally. Maya Hooten, of course, with 9 perfect 10s to her career. Maybe we'll see the 10th at Big Ten. So there's a lot of athletes and names out there that in the all-around story are incredible, but the event story itself as well, we could see a battle for the vault, bars, beam, floor titles, as well as the all-around.
Interesting you mentioned the perfect 10s. 3 years in a row, we've had a perfect 10 at the Big Ten championships. Who are the best candidates for perfect 10s here?
Well, the conference has seen 4 perfect 10s on floor this season from Sierra, Gabby, Maya Hooten, and Skyla Schulte. So I would not be shocked if we saw one from one of those athletes, but many athletes have been close this season across the board on different events. So we could see more than one perfect 10 for potentially the first time in championship history.
I mentioned that you won this. Give people a sense of kind of the mentality when you head into postseason competition like this, whether it's Big Tens or eventually NCAAs. How's it different for a gymnast?
It's all team focused. At this point, you want the Big Ten championship trophy above your heads with your team at the end. You want to move on to regionals, qualify to one of the 8 teams at nationals in Fort Worth. And so ultimately it's about the team, but you can't help but want to do your best yourself and see yourself succeed. I actually didn't know I won the all-around title until after I knew our team won. And so the mentality of athletes is all team focused, but it definitely feels good to see your individual contribution recognized.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's one of the really interesting things, right, is it is an individual sport.
Right.
In so many ways, and yet you kind of superimpose this team element on it. What is the balancing act there?
You definitely play offense and defense. I think your offense is what you can do as an athlete on the event. Your defense is controlling what you can control. I mean, we can't go out there and stop a Maya Hooten from getting a perfect 10 on floor, but we can control how we stay in our bubble, what the team can do to come together and ultimately put out the best performance, kind of minimizing that external noise. Right,
not defense in the way we conventionally think about it.
That's right.
In sports, that's frowned upon. Olivia, great stuff. Enjoyed the calls this weekend, and I know a lot of people will be watching here on the Big Ten Network as the conference's top performers put it all on the line. It's the 2024 Big Ten Women's Gymnastics Championships. Live coverage begins at noon Eastern, only on the Big Ten Network and the Fox Sports app. It did not take Nebraska long to find an athletic director to replace Trev Alberts, who left last week for Texas A&M. They have hired Troy Dannen, who was just hired last fall as the athletic director at an incoming Big Ten school, University of Washington. Prior to that, he was at Tulane. He is a Midwesterner, former AD at Northern Iowa, grew up in the state of Iowa as well. Here is how Friday shapes up for the Big Ten, Northwestern, and Florida Atlantic. Not just the first game for the Big Ten, it's the first game in the country. It tips off just after noon in Brooklyn. The other 3 games are in the evening. Nebraska battles Texas A&M. That one just before 7 Eastern. Purdue's game about a half hour after that in Indy. And Wisconsin closes things out where it begins. Also in Brooklyn, they will take on James Madison. Ray Faust back with me. We were talking a little bit of X factors with the teams that are playing tomorrow. Want to continue that theme, but really drive it home here. Let's start with Northwestern. Everyone knows about Boo Buie. He is clearly their superstar. He's the straw that stirs the drink. Who else needs to be good for the Wildcats, starting with that game against FAU.
Yeah, you could say Ryan Langborg, you could say Brooks Barnheiser. Those are the three guys that really make them go. But I'm looking at Nick Martinelli, understanding that there's no Matt Nicholson to deal with Golden inside for Northwestern defensively. And then also without Matt Nicholson, you lose some point production inside. You lose those twos that Northwestern has been able to get all season long. Nick Martinelli playing that 4 spot, he could be that Swiss Army knife. He can guard out on the perimeter, but he'll be able to take some of those FAU guards, some of those perimeter players down into the post with that old school, non-traditional game. Coach Weber likes to call it that little flipper doodle that he does over his head. I think if he can go in and get them 14 to 16 points, 8 to 10 rebounds, get to the free throw line like he's been known to do, I think that really helps their offense sink in, because I expect Boo, Ryan, and Brooks to be hooked up on the outside, but they're going to need somebody to compete inside.
Part of the challenge for them has been, as the roster has been depleted due to injuries, everyone's been able to focus a little more on the guys who can score, and there are essentially 5 guys who can score 15, 20 points any given night. He is one of them. But you look at the last 9 games, he's been in single figures 7, or I should say under 50% shooting 7 of those 9 games, and he's a 50% shooter on the year. So he's been below average for him in 7 of those 9 games. Can they get him going? You mentioned Langborg. I mean, Langborg was unbelievable in the NCAA tournament last year. He led Princeton to the Sweet 16. So he's another guy that you would look at and say perhaps he can get it going. It'll be interesting, too, and with Martinelli, I mean, Vlad Golden's a 7-footer, and so we know that about FAU. But other than that, this is not a tall team at all.
Exactly.
So Martinelli will probably have a height advantage on whoever guards him, as long as he's not playing a small ball 5.
No, I agree with you. And defensively, he's a guy that is about 6'8", 6'9", that can guard out of perimeter. He can keep those guys out of the teeth of the defense defensively. And then Northwestern, Coach Collins, they're going to go to Martinelli. They're going to see that matchup, whether it be Martinelli or Brooks Barnheiser, and they're going to attack it. I expect Jonell Davis to be on Boo Buoy, and Jonell is normally their 3 or their 4. So at times, you're going to have smaller guys playing against Martinelli, and when he has them down there, when Brooks has them down there, it's got to be back to the basket. It's got to be nose to the rim. It can't be those little fadeaway jump shots, a little off of one leg. They got to put their nose to the rim and go get to the free throw line. If this is a game where Northwestern could get FAU into the bonus around an 8-9 mark in that first half, and then now you got Boo Buoy attacking the rim, getting 1-and-1s every time he's touched, that'll really help them. If they can win the free throw game, they can win the rebounding game. If they can compete in that area and then make it a possession game. They want this game to be close with about 3-4 minutes to go, and then it's Boo Buoy time. But I think Nick Martinelli, when we've seen times where Boo Buoy struggle and Northwestern still be in the game as of late, it's been Nick Martinelli, it's been Brooks Barnheiser, it's been those guys not just producing, but getting to the free throw line and stacking up fouls on guys like Gold and guys like Jonell Davis. I think that'll speak volumes to what they could do.
Well, as we know, Northwestern's never lost an opening round game.
There we go.
In the NCAA tournament. Undefeated, 2-0
yes,
all time. Nebraska has never won one. Unfortunately, the Huskers will be looking for their first NCAA tournament win. They open up, as we know, against Texas A&M. Both the men and the women do, which is kind of crazy. Who is the X factor for Nebraska?
Mr. Consistency, Bryce Williams. You look at Nebraska and how you plan for them. You look at Keisei Tominaga. You look at Rink Mass, Juwan Gary, and then you realize Bryce Williams is a guy that's been in double figures more times this season than anybody else on that roster. He's a guy at 6'7", 220, playing that 2-guard position that can score the ball from the perimeter. He can make shots. He can play in the mid-range. He can get to the free throw line, finish at the rim. But I think he's the X factor in this game when it comes to rebounding. When you play against a team like Texas A&M, they're going to fight you on the glass. They're going to go get offensive rebounds, play after play. Offensive rebounding, 42% of their misses. Crazy. A guy like Bryce Williams, being 6'7" at the 2-guard position, can go in and clean it up. You got Rink Mass, you got Josiah Alec, you got Juwan Gary. Those guys' job are to hit and block out. And then you look at Bryce Williams. Normally, guards don't crash offensively. They normally get back and play some transition defense. I think Bryce Williams will be able to come in the game, clean up those defensive rebounds, and use those rebounds to get out and push the break. I think that's going to be key for Nebraska to take care of the defensive rebounds. If they can get Keisei in there, Bryce Williams in there to steal some, it'll really help them.
Yeah, I'm really interested to see how this team plays emotionally. That's the other thing to me. I wonder whether that can be an X factor for them. You got to know how to harness it, though, right? I mean, you would know far better than I would, but it just feels like enough is enough with this narrative. Enough is enough with we never won a game. The Trev Alberts thing has to add a little bit of fuel to the fire.
Yep.
Right? I mean, so I ask you, like, how can you turn that into a positive?
Well, one thing about players in the locker room, especially those young guys, they probably don't even know who Trev Alberts is. They don't even know what's going on. When you're on a team,
that's more of a fan thing.
That's more of a fan thing. Things that's actually guys knowing what's going on around the program. But when you're in the locker room, you don't care. You care about the guys around you. You care about the coach. You know what's going on right now. You know what's going on in that email that you got sent on Sunday. It's going to tell you what you got to do that week. That's what you care about, especially if you're dealing with classes and all that. But if you got a team in Nebraska, they're older, they're more mature, and then they appreciate it. I talked to Josiah Alec after the game in the Big Ten tournament, talked to his parents. He appreciates the moment. He appreciates being in Nebraska, being a hometown kid, and winning a game for his university. I think Nebraska is going to approach this in a great way where they have guys that's never been here. You think Keisei Tominaga, not only did he come from Japan, he went and spent time in junior college. And a lot of guys don't understand
in the middle of nowhere, by the way.
How hard junior college is.
Yeah.
And for Keisei Tominaga to burst through junior college, become a college basketball star, be in this position, be talked about on all the networks, to have these opportunities, I think this is going to be big game Keisei. You're going to get a tough Juwan Gary, Josiah Alec. That hair is going to be flying around. Rick Mass is going to have a good one. I expect Nebraska to be going full throttle.
I do, too. I think Nebraska's going to play well.
Yeah, I think they're going to shoot it well. Yep.
Let's get to Purdue. Let's get to the elephant in the room, which is Purdue has not performed well recently in NCAA tournaments, 3 straight losses to double-digit seeds. Not even focusing so much on the first game because we won't know who they're playing until tonight, but just more big picture. Everyone knows about Zach Edey. He's going to be the focus for Purdue because he always is. I mean, they built their team around Zach Edey. But he's going to be the focus for everyone else as well. So I think the X factor applies to them maybe more than anyone else, where the X factor's got to play well. Who is it?
And normally you don't want to say the X factor is one of your best players, but I think it's got to be Braden Smith. You go back to last season in the tournament, Braden Smith, 7.7 turnovers, a game that he wants to forget about. But Braden Smith this season has been phenomenal. He's been sensational in all facets of the words. He's sharing the basketball at a high rate. He's shooting it well from deep. He's getting in that ball screen action, getting to that right hand. People are talking about Zach Edey right now in Purdue as if Braden Smith wasn't an honorable mention All-American guy, like he wasn't first team All-Big Ten. If Braden Smith is hooked up, if that leg is feeling good, and he's able to play in that ball screen, if he's confident getting guys involved in the game, there's nothing you're going to be able to do with Purdue. In the Big Ten tournament, they took that loss to Wisconsin. Braden was playing on one leg. If Braden is healthy, if he's into it mentally, he's playing in that ball screen, getting downhill, throwing that ball to the rim to Zach Edey, it's going to do nothing but take the pressure off of Fletcher Lawyer not to be able to knock down shots, and then it's going to open up the floor for Lance Jones to be able to play off the bounce. I think you go back to last season, when that shot clock would go down, when there was a few seconds left, they didn't have a guy to break down a defense one-on-one. Now you have Lance Jones to be able to go get his basket. Now you have Braden Smith extremely confident in the ball screen. I really like Purdue is, and I love how everyone's still sleeping on them. They got a lot more guys. And then even off the bench, you think Miles Colvin, Cam Heide, 2 athletes that can compete with anybody in the country. But Braden Smith, he's the guy. If he's having a good tournament, if he's out there balling, it's going to take Purdue not just to the Final Four, but to the national championship.
Can't turn it over. The average is nearly 3 per game. It's the 10th most of any player in the NCAA tournament. And if you look at common threads in their losses, turnovers have been a bit of an issue. And then I think just big picture, and you're saying it, they've got to shoot the ball well.
Got to make shots
from the perimeter. And when teams beat them, part of the equation is Zach Edey's going to get his. Can he make things really tough on those other guys? And Braden Smith is the head of the snake, as he would say. Finally, the X factor for Wisconsin.
Chucky Hepburn, my guy Chucky. He came into the Big Ten tournament and dominated offensively and defensively. I keep having visions and dreams of that defensive display that he put on Braden Smith at the end of that Wisconsin game. Turned him 3-4 times, getting up the court, ended up drawing a charge. It was just big time. And then offensively, Chucky played out of his mind. He was getting to the basket. He was posting up. He was shooting the mid-range. He was knocking down shots. He was just simply being aggressive. When you get an aggressive Chucky Hepburn, it does wonders for Wisconsin. Their guards in the Big Ten tournament is what got them to the championship. It wasn't Tyler Wall. It wasn't Stephen Crowell. It was the play of Chucky, AJ, and Max. And when you get a hooked-up Chucky, I'll take him over R.J. Davis. I'll take him over any guard that's coming from the ACC. You get to that Duke game, if you could take Jeremy Roach out of that basketball game, which I think Chucky can do defensively, and you think offensively, Chucky just attacking and not be a liability on that end of the floor, I think it's going to really take Wisconsin into that Sweet 16 game.
That, to me, is a huge part. The word you used, aggressive.
Yes.
In talking to Greg Gard this year, he said we want Chucky to be more aggressive. I think it's a balancing act, right? He was trying to figure it out because last year a lot of it came down to him.
Exactly.
They just couldn't really create a whole lot of offense. They were not a good shooting team at all, a really bad one, and it just felt like a lot of times it was Chucky in close games, shot clock winding down, and then I felt like at the beginning of the year he deferred a little bit, and now I think he's figured it out. And in fact, his last 2 games have been his 2 highest scoring games since the season opener.
Yes, and
right?
they needed every single basket he's given them.
Yes, they
every
have.
Every single one.
All right, those are our X factors, but we still have more hoops to talk about. The dramatic conclusion of our show coming up next. We'll look back on last night's NIT action. Went quite well, thank you, for the Big Ten. Plus a few final thoughts straight ahead. Season off to a good start. Clean sweep in the NIT last night. Ohio State with a fun one against Cornell. Elijah Hawkins had 15 assists and hit the game-winning free throws in Minnesota's road win over Butler. Iowa got 30 and 12 from Peyton Sanford. They never trailed in a 9-point win over Kansas State. Back here with Rayfeld Davis. Quick thoughts. Let's run through them, starting with the Buckeyes.
I look at Ohio State, and you see Bruce Thornton go down with some cramps and whatnot, and they still found a way to win. They were down 2 points with a minute left to go in the game, and they found a way to win. And Coach would always tell us, good teams find a way to win. And that's why the NIT is so important, because Ohio State, they would have lost this game a couple weeks ago. No matter they were playing better or not, this is a game that they need to figure out how to win the close ones, come back from 2 points and with the last minute, go off and win by 5. It was a big-time performance. I thought Roddy Gale, Jamison Battles, they led the way, and it was their defense that ended up getting it done at the end of the day.
Trailed for more than half of the game, yet, as you said, when they needed it, chips are down. They got it done. They've got Virginia Tech coming up next. Minnesota's been a second-half team all year. Yes. They were a second-half team again against Butler on the road.
And Dawson Garcia goes for 25 points. That's the Dawson Garcia that I like to see, the one that's attacking the basket, that's not settling, that's putting his nose on the rim. And then I thought they had a really healthy balance of Dawson Garcia leading the charge, but then Elijah Hawkins leading the charge. At times this season, when Dawson Garcia has scored big, that's been the only thing they've went to, and they've lost games. But they found a way to have an even balance. Elijah Hawkins was big time, spraying the basketball all over the floor. But at the end of the day, my guy, Parker Fox, makes his play at the end of the game, gets that steal, pushes it up to Elijah Hawkins. Elijah Hawkins makes his free throw. But this is the season. You get a guy like Parker Fox to come to your program, whether it's through the portal or through the high school ranks. Every good team needs a Parker Fox, a guy that's going to go all out, play as hard as he can, not care about how many points he scored, just care about winning and caring about being a leader. I thought it was great to see Parker make that play at the end of the game.
And again, basically the entire team can come back next year, but we're still focused on this year, either Indiana State or SMU next. Iowa really made a good defensive team in Kansas State look bad.
Yeah, and I think Payne Sanford will come into the season next year as a preseason first-team guy, as a guy that we all think could be player of the year in the Big Ten.
Right.
You think after Jared Utoff left Iowa and there was Peter Jock that came in, well, it was there, but he just emerged that next season, averaged 20 points a game. I think that'll be Payne Sanford. He's a guy that can score in a vacuum. 22 points in the first half. He had 12 rebounds. Just shows he's more than a shooter. And then Ben Crickey, the super senior, he stepped up in the second half when they needed him. 21 of his 24 points. Just a great showing.
They will battle Utah next, and who knows, maybe Peyton Sanford will be on this particular list next year. It is the AP All-Americans. They were released yesterday. Purdue's Zach Edey, the lone unanimous pick. He got all 62 possible votes. Joined on the first team by Dalton Connect, R.J. Davis, Jamal Shedd, Tristan Newton. Illinois' Terrence Shannon Jr. was a third-teamer. Northwestern's Boo Buie, Purdue's Braden Smith. Honorable mention choices. Your takeaways.
You can't name me three-point guards in the country that's better than Boo Buie. I think Boo Buie's got to make one of those teams. To be a top 15 player in college basketball, I think Boo Buie goes in that. I think winning has to matter. I think what he's meant to that program 2 seasons in a row, I think things like that have to go into say, and the way he's played on the floor, the points he's put up, the way he's shot it from 3, the way he's improved has been big time. And I think the way Terrence Shannon played those last 10, 12 games of the season, I thought he should have been the first team, second team All-American. You can't show me 10 guys that's played better than Terrence Shannon over the last 2 months. I thought what he did in the Big Ten tournament, Outside of Zach Edey, Terrence Shannon is the second best player in all of college basketball. He was great on both ends.
I agree with you on both accounts. Terrence Shannon was incredible all year, and certainly the Big Ten tournament was a historic performance. You think about this with Bowie, more than 19 points, 5 assists, and better than 44% from three with at least 5 attempts per game.
That's crazy.
Denzel Valentine, David Stoudemire, Boo Bowie.
That's crazy.
The only high major players ever to do that.
It's only because the brand of Northwestern. I hate that for him. I hate it for him.
I don't know what it is. I don't know what it is
makes no
because
sense.
they've gotten a lot of publicity.
But one thing I will say, Boo Bowie is going to get that Boo Bowie statue outside of Welsh Ryan Arena. I'm still raising money for you, Boo. I don't have my bucket with me, but I wish I did.
You've got to get a better collection box for that. I think it's all part of the branding. It's got to look better.